Hezbollah, it's important to remember, is a much, much stronger military force than Hamas is. They have 150,000 missiles there by open source description. So, they pose a very, very different kind of threat to Israel than Hamas does. And I think there's a lot of folks in Israel right now who feel like they might as well deal with that threat now because it's going to have to happen sooner or later. So there's real risk there that this is going to escalate, and I think that's probably the primary focus of Secretary Blinken's meetings, not just with the Israelis but with others in the region.
A top Hezbollah commander has been killed in what's believed to have been an Israeli airstrike in Lebanon, as Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, continues his meeting with Middle East leaders in an effort to prevent the war between Israel and Hamas from spreading. Hezbollah identified the commander as Wissam Hassan Tawil. Lebanese media reported he was killed in an airstrike on his vehicle in southern Lebanon, days after Hezbollah launched a massive barrage of rockets at an Israeli aerial surveillance base. Israel confirmed that they'd hit a Hezbollah military site with airstrikes. It came as Antony Blinken was meeting Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman before travelling to Israel to meet Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tomorrow. Well, Frank Lowenstein is a former US Special Envoy for Israeli-Palestinian negotiations and a former US Special Envoy for the Middle East and joins us now. Good evening to you, Frank.
Hi, how are you?
Very well. Good to have you with us. Tell us what you make of this latest development. A top Hezbollah commander killed inside Lebanon.
Yeah, it's a very difficult situation for Secretary Blinken. And important to remember that this comes on the heel of Israel assassinating a Hamas leader in Beirut a couple of days ago, Aruri. So Hezbollah responds to that, and then Israel responds to that, and everybody on the United States end is trying to keep things under control. And then Israel goes and assassinates another Hezbollah commander, and it just exacerbates tensions at a time when the United States is doing everything we can to prevent the conflict from spreading.
There's been no official confirmation from Israel that it actually killed this commander, Wissam Hassan Tawil, but you seem in little doubt that this was an Israeli strike.
Yeah, I mean, Israel will deny it if they haven't been involved in it, which is what happened in the with the Soleimani funeral procession in Iran. So yeah, if Israel doesn't deny it, it's pretty safe to say they did it. And also, they've acknowledged that they had IDF was striking targets in southern Lebanon, really designed to push Hezbollah back away from the border so that Israeli citizens can return to that area. But it's a tinderbox there right now, and I think the United States has basically told Israel that we will defend them if Hezbollah makes a move across the border into Israel, but we will not back them up if they make a move over the border into Lebanon. So I think it's a pretty tense situation with us and the Israelis right now.
Yes, it's interesting that because, of course, the main focus of Israel's war is on Hamas in Gaza. It's continuing that military operation there. But at the same time, Israel has faced rocket attacks from southern Lebanon into northern Israel. And Hezbollah, it's pretty clear, is behind those.
Yes, 100%. And in fact, Hezbollah, it's important to remember, is a much, much stronger military force than Hamas is. They have 150,000 missiles there by open source description. So, they pose a very, very different kind of threat to Israel than Hamas does. And I think there's a lot of folks in Israel right now who feel like they might as well deal with that threat now because it's going to have to happen sooner or later. So there's real risk there that this is going to escalate, and I think that's probably the primary focus of Secretary Blinken's meetings, not just with the Israelis but with others in the region.
So there is then this clear concern by Secretary of State Blinken, by President Biden, that this whole conflict could be escalating. We're also looking at those attacks on shipping in the Red Sea. Tell us a bit more about Antony Blinken's tour of the region.
Yeah, I think he's probably focused primarily in conversations with the other countries that he's been to in the region, which, obviously the Emiratis, the Saudis, the Turks, the Egyptians, the Jordanians, on how we can prevent this from becoming a regional conflict. And you pointed out the threat the Houthis have been posing to shipping in the Red Sea. We put out a very clear warning to the Houthis about 4 or 5 days ago saying, if you continue to harass shipping, we will attack your bases inside of Yemen. So I think that there's some diplomacy there, but it's also also backed up with the threat of force. But obviously, we really don't want to do that. We're very much hoping that this sort of diplomatic effort can quiet things down, not just on the Lebanon border, in Yemen, in Iraq, where we killed a militia commander, and generally speaking, try to prevent this what's beginning to look like a proxy war between the United States and Iran getting played out in countries all around the region, to bring that under control, to lower tensions a little bit and try to put it on a path where we can have some kind of sustainable peace.
Because, of course, Iran backs Hezbollah in Lebanon. It backs the Houthis in Yemen. I'm just looking at a story on the Times here in London tonight, saying that Saudi Arabia, and Antony Blinken has been in Saudi Arabia today, but is amongst a number of Middle Eastern countries, saying that they would actually support military action against the Houthis who are disrupting the shipping. I mean, that could be quite significant, couldn't it, Frank?
Yeah, very much so, and it's not surprising that the Saudis are giving Blinken the go ahead to go attack Yemen, because they fought a war against the Houthis in Yemen for 2 years, right, which ended sort of unsuccessfully to them. So yeah, not surprising that the Saudis would be pushing that kind of action, but at the same time, I think from the United States perspective, we would like the threat of force to create a deterrent effect so that we don't have to go down that path at all. And it remains to be seen, how much appetite Iran has for conflict. But by all accounts, the supreme leader there, Khamenei, does not want a war with the United States right now. Hezbollah, Nasrallah does not want a war with Israel right now. But at the same time, they keep on pushing, beyond the point where we're willing to tolerate it. We might see this thing spinning out of control. So I think that's very much what Secretary Blinken is trying to avoid.
Yeah, and Antony Blinken is meeting Benjamin Netanyahu tomorrow to continue to call for restraint. But I mean, how much do you think there is a concern in the United States that it's essentially in Benjamin Netanyahu's interests to keep this war with Hamas going for as long as possible, because he's under such huge domestic pressure? And in a sense, it's only because he's leading a country at war that is preventing that domestic political battle from coming out into the open.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I think there's one more step to all that, which is that if Netanyahu is not the prime minister, he's looking at a long jail sentence. So he's not only looking to stay in power as prime minister, he's looking to stay out of jail, because once he's no longer prime minister, that case will proceed, and if he's convicted, he'll go to jail. So yeah, I think from the United States perspective, we're concerned that Bibi's own personal interests may be taking precedence over what's in Israel's long-term interest, and obviously what's in our interest. So it's a very delicate balance with them. I think the Israelis have said now, they just said publicly today, there's a story in the New York Times to this effect, that they are going to transition to a more targeted military operation in the south and in the center of Gaza. So they're going to try to limit civilian casualties to a degree they have certainly not done in the past. I think what Blinken will be saying is, I would like to see actions and not just words on that front, so that we really can sort of nail the Israelis down on changing course there in a way that would make their campaign, which we will continue to support, much more sustainable. There's also the massive question of the humanitarian catastrophe that's going on the ground right now, particularly in southern and central Gaza, and the dire need to get more humanitarian assistance in there. And that's not just a matter of getting trucks across the border, which, by the way, Israel is not doing anywhere near enough of. But there's also the question of how are you going to get that humanitarian assistance to the people who are in most need. And my sense is the only way to do that is with a humanitarian pause of some time, a week or two. And the idea would be you would trade that pause off for a return of some or all of the remaining hostages. So I think that would also be a primary topic of conversation for Secretary Blinken and Prime Minister Netanyahu tomorrow.